Hi, Elaine here. On this episode, I wanted to talk about the emerging terms yassification and enshittification. It was actually Carlyn who first introduced me to the yassification, the idea of upgrading a product's packaging to better appeal to consumers, even while the base product does not change. When she mentioned this to me, I thought of another idea, that of enshittification, which can also be known as crapification or platform decay, the process of degrading quality of a product over time to maximize profits, and is usually used when discussing online products and services. But I have seen this in the real world as well, with product decline or shrinkflation in everyday products. Both of these are ways of defining the relationship between an actual product and how a consumer views them. One in which the product is given a facelift to make it more appealing, and the other where the product fails to live up to its original appeal. Both are done by a company, seemingly with the aim of increasing profit. I wanted to sit down with Carlyn to discuss how we view these new terms and how we see our own interactions with the products that define them. Again, I'm Elaine.
And I'm Carlyn.
Welcome back to our podcast, Related. Carlyn, as I was doing my morning scroll through Reddit, I actually saw an example of yassification, or what I think is an example of yassification. I'm deferring to you because I think you're the expert here.
Oh, I'm so curious. I don't know that I would consider myself an expert per se, but please go ahead, and then we can go from there.
Well, I don't know if you have watched the Megan Sussex, Duchess of Sussex, however she wants to refer to herself.
I have not. I cannot get myself. Sorry, this is an aside, but as soon as I heard that she hadn't actually filmed it at her own house, I was out. I was out. Yeah.
Anyway, so she has a show on Netflix. And I think before she had a show on Netflix, she had this product line. And I saw on my Reddit post that someone had bought her hibiscus tea from the As Ever line from Megan of Sussex, Duchess of Sussex. And I was curious. So I went to the website to see how much it costs.
Right, and I'm going right now too. Hibiscus tea.
As of this morning, it was about $12 for 0.9 ounces of tea.
Oh my gosh. And it's out of stock.
Which I have purchased hibiscus tea last week, 4 ounces for $4. So that's a markup.
Yes.
For the Duchess of Sussex tea brand. Carlyn, is this yassification?
Ooh, it's a good question. So I'm looking at it's okay. In some ways, I would say yes.
Okay.
In some ways, I think there are other factors at play. So I'm looking at the branding, for example, and I'm assuming, I haven't tried the product yet, right? So I have no notion of the ingredients or how organic it is or
not organic.
Okay.
Not
organic.
Hers is not organic. The one I bought last week is organic.
Okay. And also I'm looking at the website. It says ingredients, hibiscus flowers. That's all we get.
I mean, that's all that was in mine for comparison's sake.
Okay. So if we're assuming that there's nothing particularly special about the product itself,
yes,
then what it really is, and again, where I'm hesitant to call it like full-on yassification, is there's definitely sort of an influencer celebrity component to it, which I think is related to yassification. But I think that there is a trend also of sort of celebrity brands, influencer brands as well, where you're not necessarily paying just for cool branding, which is sort of where I baseline yassification at. You're also paying for like the persona too and the affiliation.
Okay, that's interesting because I would have put, because I think of the celebrity as part of the marketing strategy, I would have thought with my non-marketing background that would be part of the branding apparatus. But you're saying
I
not necessarily.
I think I think it's part of it. That's why I'm saying I think on face level, if you took Meghan Markle, Meghan Sussex dishes out of it, right?
Yeah.
And just said, this is a herbal hibiscus tea, which is basically, it's just flowers, people, right? It's just like packaged flowers. And you have upcharged, you said you bought it for normally like $4, right?
I
So
bought 4 ounces for $4 versus
okay, so
1
they've
ounce
more,
for $12.
okay, so they've basically more than like 300%ed up the price here, right? Like beyond that.
Yeah.
And like put it in a nice little tin with like pretty little sort of monograph, like signature type, right?
Yes.
I think on principle, if you had told me that without the Meghan Markle component,
Okay.
I would have been like, yes, you basically took a bare bones, simple, basic product that should be like very affordable and basic, and you've basically kind of rebranded it to be worthy of a higher price point. Worthy in quotation marks,
Yes.
right? But I think what was just, and again, I'm not saying it's not yassification. It's just you have this additional layer of celebrity influencer, which I think goes into that price tag, if that makes sense.
So could you give me an example of something that is more pure yassification?
Yes. I mean, it's interesting too, and I'm so glad you brought the example of CPG, a consumer product good, because I think this is happening so much across the CPG industry. So think like common everyday goods. The one that I've been using a lot as an example is Graza, the olive oil.
Okay.
There's also another brand called Fish Wish, which is a like canned tin fish, like like canned sardines and things. And basically what they've done is they've taken either everyday products or sort of everyday categories and just rebranded, just like made the branding cool. I call them Instagram brands or millennial brands, and they up-level the packaging. There's a very clear look and feel to these kinds of brands.
Yeah.
And like they're very colorful. They use a very specific kind of font. Sometimes they use like I've seen a joke on the internet about it's like an otter holding an olive or something. Like that's not in the case. It's like often like cute animals, maybe like a little bit of cartoony or a little graphic. And so I use Graza as an example, is they basically took olive oil, they put it in a really, really cool packaging, and they're selling it at over $20 a piece, to the point where people are now buying the bottle, using the olive oil, and then buying like Costco olive oil and putting it in the bottle.
Yes.
Like that to me defines yassification, is where you're buying it for the packaging or the branding, not for the actual product itself. Did I answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So you are talking to someone who buys her olive oil and tuna fish at Costco.
Right.
So presumably people are aware that they are buying it for the packaging.
Yeah.
Is there a reasoning behind that? It's just cute. It's just aesthetically pleasing.
Well, okay. I've been thinking a lot about this. Do people know that okay. I think inherently people do know that they're buying it for the packaging. But I also think that if you're a consumer and you spend a lot of time on Instagram or just on the internet in general, or if you're part of a specific demographic, there is now enough consumer brands doing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of sort of redesigning, repackaging their goods. And you're seeing this, I will say, with newly launched companies and goods, but you're also now starting to see it with older companies who are now rebranding to stay relevant. And so I think it becomes kind of an aesthetic cue, if that makes sense. It becomes sort of an unconscious signal to a consumer of like, this product is for you, if that makes sense. So if I'm a millennial, let's say, and I spend a lot of time on Instagram, Reddit, or whatnot, and then also advertisers are learning what I'm buying inherently, but also what my peers are buying, then I'm going to, it's like, okay, what's a better example? I'm going to pose this question to you. When you go into any store, right, are there like signals to you visually of what you would buy and what you wouldn't buy?
So actually, taking my example of the olive oil and the tuna fish,
Yeah.
both are Kirkland brand.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that yassification of olive oil and tuna fish in that Costco is advertising to me that this is like a no frills brand? And that appeals to me as who I am as a consumer.
Potentially, right? Because I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily their intention, but maybe if you are going to Costco and saying, I just want bare bones, but like decent, good enough quality, and it will also be a fair price, then I'm going to look for the Kirkland brand, right?
Yeah.
But if you're someone...
Costco does is it sources from other brands and is basically like, this is the best deal, so we're going to put our brand on it.
Totally. And so I think what's happening with sort of yassification, millennial rebrand syndrome, I've heard so many different terms for it, is that's what consumer product companies think consumers want. And to a certain extent, they're right? But it's a perpetual pattern of now, like, and I'll be the first to admit I find fault of this, is like, I will see Graza, the olive oil, on a shelf. I'll be like, oh, that's really pretty packaging, right? And I'm not inherently thinking, I've been trained to not necessarily think, is that actually like high quality olive oil, right? Am I actually paying for quality? I am to a certain extent paying for the packaging, but there's also this cyclical component of I'm buying it because that's also what like the products of my peer set look like. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. So when you first introduced this idea to me, this distinction between the base product itself and the branding, I immediately thought of enshittification, which
I had never heard of. So I love this. Yes. Yeah.
Which is where a product basically worsens over time, and while the brand name might stay the same, the product declines.
Yeah.
Do you have similar experiences with enshittification in the marketing world?
Yeah. So, okay. I mean, I've been thinking about this, and as I went down a deep, dark rabbit hole into the term of enshittification, I was thinking a lot. I was thinking a little bit about consumer goods, but I was also thinking a lot about just base level the internet in general. And I also grew up, for listeners, a lot of my background is in consumer tech. So it's with the streaming platforms, the social media platforms of the world. Although I will be the first to proudly say I have never actually worked for Meta. So, but I have worked with Meta, let's put it that way. And I think what's really interesting about enshittification is this pattern or behavior, right, of originally creating a product. And I think this applies to both a tech platform or a consumer product good, of creating a product that consumers initially really love and creates a lot of value, right?
Yeah.
And then slowly these companies, which are ultimately trying to be really profitable, slowly extract more and more value from consumers. And the way they do that usually is by somehow undermining the quality of the platform. And I'm going to use an example of Substack, which right now is sort of a darling now within the social media platform. But they've started to slowly introduce some what people are calling like growth features recently. Like it used to just be long form writing, right? That sort of functioned as a network of blogs. Yeah. And then they introduced a feed, which was written notes, sort of a la like Twitter-esque, Twitter, Blue Sky-esque form. Yeah. And now they're introducing reels too. And people are really upset about it because they're like, that's not what we came to this platform for. Yeah. But you're adding this feature to take more of my time and my attention, and also compete with other platforms like Instagram and TikTok. And so I see Substack, it's literally enshittification in progress right now.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, there's like there's like the platform side, and I use that in that anecdote is because I'm seeing it with consumer product goods too, for sure, is that there is less of an emphasis, and this is a blanket term, right? And I'm talking more about, I think, more mass consumerism versus sort of more like boutique small business. There is an increasing emphasis as businesses try to scale and grow and extract value and become profitable on the superficial layer of what will bring a consumer in versus the quality of the actual product. And I think in some ways, and I've been thinking a lot about this in the context of inflation and also from a personal level, since I left Netflix and a very high paying job, I've become a little bit more cost conscious, right? About how I'm spending my money. I think I had been trained to just buy whatever seemed like cool and trendy. And I'm starting to pay a lot more attention to what is actually quality and realizing that a lot of the things that I've been buying are actually not quality.
Yeah. So
did I answer your question? Sorry, that was such a long-winded answer. Yeah.
I do want to like drill into what you're saying at the last part about products, people extracting value in more consumer-based products.
Yeah.
Because in the last 2 years, similar to you, I've been a lot more budget conscious. So have been like reading ingredients when I go to the grocery store on the back, and have noticed even in the last 2 years that ingredients have slowly declined on the same product, or the weight of the product has gone down even though the price has stayed the same. And so that all tied to me, while enshittification is usually used as a term to describe a platform online, I've really seen it just at the grocery store.
I agree. I will also say for me, where it's become most apparent is clothing. And it's come to the point actually where I recently have, I really need to fix this problem in winter here, or actually in summer here in LA, the moths really go against my like cashmere and wool sweaters. And I have this beautiful like pink cashmere sweater that I love. It fits perfectly. But I now pretty much annually will pay to have it mended by a professional weaver versus rebuy the sweater, because the quality of the sweater now, like if you buy it new, is actually less than what it used to be when I originally bought it. And I'm having a hard time finding or trusting brands, if that makes sense, in terms of the quality. Like I think if you think about materials in the context of food or ingredients, I've been thinking a lot about is it 100% organic cotton? How much synthetic fiber is it? How long lasting is it? That it's harder to find those brands.
I actually, even before I left the law firm world, I had actually started buying clothes used, because I found that the more vintage clothing that I bought, the longer it lasted. I really don't buy new clothes anymore, because I know that I can get a comparable item used for much less that will last me much longer.
Yep. Agreed.
So I explained how I saw those themes interacting with each other. Does that resonate with you as well? The themes of yassification and enshittification?
Yeah, for sure. And I will also say, I think, and this is maybe more of my marketing brain thinking out loud here, is I also wonder if enshittification is also they're not just the two sides of the same coin. They also are attribute to one another. For example, so if you think about why people buy yassified goods or like millennially rebranded goods, a lot of it is due to, let's say, Instagram marketing or like TikTok advertising. And people are finding these products online, right?
Yes.
And then if you think about enshittification, which I think, again, applies to both physical product but also tech platforms. But I think there's been an increase in like the enshittification of how online platforms and like online advertising works too, right? And I think like when I think of enshittification, what it brings up for me more broadly is this general looming sense that I have had that when I go to the internet these days, I really don't know what I'm going to get, right? I don't really know what to trust. I don't really know where to look.
Yeah.
And so if you like take that and then like also think about what the internet is selling you too, there's something there for me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You're touching upon this, like, this even broader world where we're just like consumers living in a capitalist world.
Totally. Yeah.
How does that make you feel?
Kind of shitty.
Is that too broad of a question?
No, it's a good question. This is not necessarily yassification per se, but there is a growing, and I think you're probably actually more familiar with this than I am because you're more like environmentally savvy. But there is a trend, and I'm seeing this a lot with my friends around brands like Aloe Yoga, Beyond Yoga, the whole like PFA plastic sort of debate, right? Of what are the materials that go into the products that we are consuming. And I do feel like there is a growing subset of consumers who are starting to pay more attention to what is in the food that they're eating, what is in the clothes that they're wearing. I even have a friend who makes her own candles because like most candles are actually really toxic, right?
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, it makes me feel shitty, but I also feel like how do we turn this on the other side to empower consumers to make more decisions and also perhaps demand more of the products and the companies that we're buying from? Because I think there has been this period of us just kind of accepting blindly what has been given to us and dealt to us and marketed to us. But I do feel like there's a growing, I don't know, an awakening maybe in consumers around demanding more from.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you feel the same? Yeah.
I was sitting with this question and thinking about the brands that I buy.
Yeah.
And because I am a consumer in this world, there are brands that I buy.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about those brands and what they indicate to me. And like you said, I'm very environmentally conscious. So a lot of my brands are focused on environmental development.
Yeah.
So that is, I think in some ways brands can indicate coolness or trendiness, but they can also indicate like, this is our mission. This is what we're going for.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have to be aware of like greenwashing. So you really do have to do your research, but there are brands that I buy from because I know they are the better alternative.
Yeah. I'm curious because as you're asking this question, I was just thinking, I was like, what brands do I love? And I honestly like can't tell you what those are. I
like
feel
clothing
like
brands, olive oil brands.
Yeah. Like I like truly. I mean, okay. Actually, I really like Quince these days. Have you heard of Quince?
Okay.
I think what Quince is doing well is they're making like good quality items without the markups.
Yeah.
And hopefully they don't, enshittify, yassify at some point. I mean, presumably maybe they will, but I hope they don't. But that's like one of the only brands. Okay, no, I lied. And then there's like LL Bean, which even though they changed their customer lifetime policy, I do feel like they still make good quality items. But increasingly when I think about where I go when I consume, it's actually it's like, what sources do I go to consume? So, okay, here's a weird example. I don't know why this came up to mind, but like if I'm going to buy, so as you know, I dabble in fly fishing. I'm a novice fly fisher. And I probably wouldn't go to a brand per se to dictate what like gear, like a new fishing vest or a new pair of waders, right? What I probably would do is go to a trusted fly fish shop and be like, what should I buy?
So
right?
The brand is the shop itself.
The brand is the shop, or it's like a trusted source that I know will point me in the right direction across maybe a series of brands or companies to like good quality within like my specific budget or needs, if that makes sense. So that's how I'm shopping these days versus a loyalty to brands, which is like when I was a teenager or even in my 20s, I feel like there was a handful of brands that I just always bought from.
So that's so interesting because I feel like I might have more brand loyalty than you do.
I think you probably do.
Who buys used? Because it's like if I'm going to buy used, if I see an LL Bean used shirt, I'm going to buy the LL Bean brand used shirt.
I'm curious, what are the brands that you feel loyal to or pulled to?
So because I buy used, I think brands that were really quality, if I'm buying clothing. I am attracted to brands that did quality clothing like 20 years ago, 20 years ago. So LL Bean, Madewell, J. Crew. Like not where I would shop these days because I don't think their quality has sustained. And then designer brands, which I would never buy new. Like totally. Ralph Lauren, Neiman Marcus. Anything where I recognize someone who is like out of the fashion world, but I'm buying used and I recognize the name, I kind of know that it's probably made well.
Okay, this is a little bit of an aside, but just again, as we're having this conversation about brands I love, I'm also realizing that some of the brands that I most love and trust aren't necessarily trying to sell me anything. So like national parks, for example.
No, they are trying to sell you something because season membership is $80 a year.
Okay, that is true. But like the broader, I think we're probably in the minority, right? Of people who are diehard annual, pass members, right? But if I think about how amazing their Instagram is, right? And they do a really great job of both like educating and entertaining. They've built this really fun brand and persona around national parks and nature, which I love.
But then is the brand the experience?
I think the brand, okay, let's put it this way. So the experience in my perspective, although some might argue against this just because I know some of the parks have gotten extremely crowded in recent years, right? But for me, the experience of going to a national park is like one of the best ways you can spend a day or a long weekend, right? So it fundamentally lives up to the promise of the fun, educating branding that they put out, right? Like the product. And so maybe they are trying to sell me something, right? But like the product matches what they're selling, right? And I also think I'm a huge advocate these days for like celebrating the physical world and in-person experiences. So when it's something that really is actually feeding my soul, being out in nature, not being on screens, it feels like a kind of consumerism that I totally will buy into versus the reality is I don't really need a cool olive oil.
Something you said, I think touches on, I think for me, what it is about, which is the brand matching the product. And that is what I'm looking for. And I feel like yassification and enshittification are just ways in which that is no longer happening.
Agreed. Agreed. Or yes, I agree. And I think what's sad is that it's in many cases, at least for older brands where maybe they were once living up to the promise, is now they're not, but they've also captured, again, maybe more on the platform side than the physical product side, but they've captured users.
Yeah.
In a cycle.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking about my KitchenAid mixer because I bought it or Dad bought it for me because it was a apartment housewarming gift. But he bought it, I think, before they started to they have a wooden bowl now. Have you seen this?
I have. I remember you sharing it with the family when they first released it because it looks prettier than I'm sure it actually functions, right?
You can't actually use it for its function, so you have to buy a second bowl. But it's I bought a KitchenAid. I know the quality of my KitchenAid and probably all the KitchenAids that came before it, and so KitchenAid I think is doing what you're saying. Is they're using this renown that they had to continue to sell KitchenAids and even ridiculous items like a wooden bowl.
It's so funny because I also, maybe to your point, I don't bake a lot or use a KitchenAid. As you know, I have a KitchenAid that a friend gifted to me when she moved out of the country that just sits on my counter.
It is very pretty,
right? I'm like, oh, I have it. I'm like, I have this KitchenAid. But if I were buying for the first time, I would maybe buy the wooden bowl one, not knowing that it actually does not function as well. So
how do we make sure that what we're buying is brand equals product? Is it just research?
I think some of it is research. I will also say I'm increasingly not buying things online because when it comes to clothing, let's say, right? And I know that because you're buying secondhand, you're inherently doing a lot of that already. I think I used to just buy things off the internet, kind of more just trusting that the quality would be good. And then I would get the materials and be like, not only does this maybe even the tag said it was cotton, but it doesn't feel good, right? Or the cut isn't right, or because I think quality isn't just about the ingredients and the materials. It's also about fit and production, right? And so I've increasingly been going offline to buy my goods, which also I think makes me a lot more intentional because I'm not just buying things that are advertised to me, but I also get to a certain extent. I know this isn't the case with food as much, but I don't know, I'm just not as tempted to buy the flashy, trendy, pretty thing, and instead I'm much more focused on the quality that I'm getting for the price that I'm paying because it's a much more tactile experience. I don't know that answers your question. For me, it's more how do I change my behavior so I'm not buying into the yassified and shittified machine and instead paying attention to the things that I care about. I also, this last thing I opened up my financial accounts this morning and was like, wow, I lost a lot of money because of these tariffs and stuff. I wonder if I just think that I'll be really curious if this is a sustaining pattern. I don't know what sort of the next few months are going to look like, if more people are going to be, as they're even more price conscious. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, maybe they'll go for lower prices and even shittier goods, or people will be, I don't know.
It's interesting what you said about the current economic climate, because I've been thinking a lot about the Great Depression. A lot of the habits that our grandmother had that I think came out of the Great Depression, reusing items and finding other ways of using items that are not their original.
No waste, not wasting.
Yeah. Which I had kind of bought it to, I think, from the environmental aspect, but I wonder if more people are going to buy into it as we see people having less money to spend.
Yeah. It's going to be a harder pill for someone to be like, yes, I'll pay $25 for a bottle of olive oil.
Yeah.
Even if it looks pretty.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed our conversation today, we look forward to sharing more with you.
Follow us now so that when our next episode premieres, you can be sure not to miss it. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts.
See you next time, everyone.